Hi everyone, and welcome to another live about Galapagos, different topics. So let's wait a couple of minutes before everyone is in. Let's see if it works on Instagram as well. Very good. There we go. That works. So I do see comments. So let me know where you are tuning in from. I hope we have a couple of people watching today. I'm again back home in Costa Rica, as you can see behind me. Today, unfortunately, it's a little bit louder once we have a couple of working going on the street, but we also have the cicadas, which are actually quite more noisy than the workers. So let me know where you are coming from, where you're tuning in from, to make sure that you see where the chat is, to see where you can put your questions in. So this live is for you. I will put it, as the others obviously, in as a replay as well, so you can see it afterwards. However, it is also for you the time to ask questions. So we will have the topic. I will talk a little bit about it, and then you can ask me any question you have about the Galapagos. Happy to answer. Also, if it is a question that I answered already, don't be shy to just ask. I also will be available afterwards in Zoom if you like, if you have a couple of more questions. And there we see Indiana, Switzerland, cold, wet, rainy from the UK. Yeah, I'm quite lucky with the weather, I have to say. It's the rainforest. The worst thing that can happen is it's raining, which is quite nice. It is a nice country full of life and animals. So yeah, perfect. So if you have already questions, I see there the first questions coming in. Put it already in the chat so you don't forget it. I will answer that after the live. So first of all, again, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. One question and one fear I have the feeling of many people are the dive conditions to currents in the Galapagos Islands. And for me, it always feels, we hear so many horror stories. So I personally can remember when I came the first time to Galapagos, I heard so many horror stories. I was terrified of basically just jumping in. And I do see that every year of divers hearing all the stories and then coming really fearful to the island. So the check dive is usually the most complicated one because so many people have still the fear in their head that they suddenly forget how diving works. So don't fear it too much. So the Galapagos Islands, and I did that in the others as well, you have to put in different regions because different currents means different temperature, but also different currents. So we have the northern parts, so the far north with Wolf and Darwin, which are the dive places in the Galapagos Islands with all the sharks and rays and fur seals and just life. That is more tropical. We said in my last live, much warmer than the rest, more tropical fish, more big schools of fish. However, also more exposed. So when we're talking of currents, that is the area we will focus on today. Then you have one day in the cold area on the west side of Isabella, where we tend to have in the area where we're diving, that's in the bay, nearly no current whatsoever, sometimes a little bit, but not much. And then we have the central islands where you usually have 2.5 days, depending if you are calculating the check dive. And there's, I would say, moderate, not very strong currents. You don't really feel it. But yeah, that a little bit of current, I would say, you can expect. Up in the north, sometimes you have no currents whatsoever. And then you have days where it's howling current. So when I came the first time, I really was afraid. I jumped in and I personally had nothing. I thought it's always like this. I can tell you after over 10 years diving in the Galapagos, there are other days. However, I always would encourage you to think about what is the fear that we have. So what I personally feared, I think, was to jump in the water, not fast enough going down and I'm losing the crew. Or what I often hear from divers, but what I'm doing when I, can't hold on and I get swept away and losing the crew. And what else? Question to you that are right now in the chat, what is really your fear of current? What could happen? To then go in what really happens, because it is not that bad to have currents, because more currents often means more sharks, and usually much, much more intimate, much closer shark encounters. So often we do kind of hope to have a little bit of current in the Galapagos to see more sharks and more close-up sharks. So to go into the fear, you're going down, you can't go fast enough down, and the current is so strong, you see the group, but you're getting away, getting away, getting away. The group will wait. So usually, especially up in the north, and we talk right now more about the north because that is where most of the people are afraid of, where we have sometimes currents. Group will wait for you. So if you're coming down a little bit slower, it will make a little bit of effort because you have to catch up to the group, but we will wait. There's no reason not to wait for you. So the group and the dive master always will wait for you. If for some reason you're ill, you can't equalize at all, which usually never happens because it's on day 3, 4 within the dive trip. Unless you're really sick and you have a cold, most of the divers, it's just the fear that we have in our head. When we suddenly feel it's not that bad, it's easier to go down. But for any reason you can't, you would go up to the surface, you would have to abandon your dive, obviously, but the panga will be waiting there. So the panga drivers, so the zodiac drivers that bring us to the dive site, will be constantly with us. So they will watching our bubbles. So even if something during the dive happens and you have to go up, they will be there. They will pick you up. Second scenario was like you're down, you suddenly, why you would lose the group, I don't know, but let's say you lose the group. What happens, It's not the end of the world. You just deploy your safety sausage, you go slowly up, you obviously you do a slow ascent, and again, the zodiac driver will see your bubbles and will come up and will pick you up. We do have a lot of safety equipment because we have the currents, and not every diver is always following the rules and the dive guides. We do have safety sausages that we give you. We have a GPS, so on the surface you always have a GPS to deploy if you would get lost. What else? We have the horn to make noise when you're on the surface. So if you are not on purpose losing the group, it usually doesn't happen. Flexibility. I think it's all about flexibility. And I'm going to the step what the dive guides do just in a second. It's about your flexibility. It's not about fitness. It's not that we have to fight against current. What we usually do, if there's strong current, we going in as a group, we're going down, and then we find a nice spot out of the currents. That might be behind some boulders. It might be behind some lava rocks. And there we usually just hold on. So every diver finds, basically it's like a platform, finds a nice spot to hold on, and then it's like cinema. You're just basically hanging there, holding on with your one hand, and then it's like hammerhead streaming by, Galapagos streaming by, and it's just beautiful, without any effort. You see a lot of wildlife. So that is a usual dive. So we then decide if there's a lot of action, we stay there. If there's not as much action, we might move to another spot, another hiding spot where we find us, again, a very comfortable place, holding on, and then watch. We are not fighting against currents the whole dive. That would be, it's kind of a drift dive with some stops on the way, I would call it. So we do know, so the dive guides do know the area. They do know where we can get out of the current and can enjoyably watch everything. That is number one. If you're following the group in the dive guide, you are always in a good place. And the dive guide will make sure that you will find a comfortable position. And if you cannot, then just ask your dive guide, can you give me instructions? You have maybe a better view, which rock is better suited, so I don't, look for corals, that you don't destroy corals. The dive guide would be always very happy to make sure that you see it very well. So Galapagos is very often kind of a platform or on Wolf. It's kind of a slope where we then find nice rocks just to hold on if we would have strong currents. And again, it's not very often. Sometimes it happens, but it can change from day to day, from week to week, how strong the currents are. But it's just adjusting the dive plan. It means also that you need to be flexible. So the dive guide might give you a briefing. Oh yeah, we're going down, and then the reef is on our left-hand shoulder, and we're going up after this and this and this. And then suddenly go underwater, and then your reef is on the right side. because the current changed. So in the Galapagos, dive guides will always adapt immediately underwater. So they will tell you in the briefing that is the plan, because that is the usual current that we encounter. However, if the current changes, we might to adapt our dive plan. So don't be fixated on just diving the plan. Be flexible, and then stay with the guide. He or she will always make sure that you have a good spot to see everything and to be comfortable, because it's about your enjoyment. And I mean, I often, for those who are really, really afraid of current, I just encourage you to imagine yourself just, being behind a rock and just, watching like in a cinema chair, the hammerheads and the Galapagos sharks swimming by, because often it is more or less like this. Yes, we do have days where it's very strong, where it is quite challenging to dive, but the dive guide will make sure to bring you to an area which is more protected and where you still see a lot. There's no secret, there's still a lot of accidents happening in the Galapagos Island, dive accidents. However, if you look more into details of those dive accidents, they always happen to people that not following the rules, often divers that like to overjudge their capabilities. They always have to prove something, and it's not about proving something to yourself. It's about having a good time, seeing a lot of wildlife, and it's not about fighting or proving something. It's about enjoyment and observing. And if you are with your dive guide, with your group, you are in a good spot, because the dive guide always makes sure that you are safe and that you enjoy it. He will or she will help you to find a good place. I do know that there are differences in dive guides in Galapagos, which is often obviously an advantage to make sure to have the good dive guides and the good and safe boats. But if you have questions about, very happy to help. What I didn't talk about, we're adjusting the dive plan, obviously, when we're going underwater. We might also come up earlier. So I had this question, was it 2 or 3 years ago? I think 2 years ago, we were in Wolf and we did our safety stop. And suddenly the dive guide says, okay, we're not finished with the safety stop. However, the current is much, much stronger and it will bring us into areas where we don't want to be. So we abandon the safety stop and we just will go slowly up. Because they do know the area. We do have areas with washing machine. We do have areas with down current, but those we usually do not dive. And if you're following the instruction of your guide and not ignoring them, you will be safe, because they know, okay, in this distance, with this speed, we need to go up to have everyone safe in the Zodiac before we are getting into areas we don't want to be. So please always follow the instruction of the guide. It is in Galapagos more important than in other areas. But the people that are most afraid are usually the ones that listen the best to the dive guide and are usually very, very safe. It's more the ones that are not listening that are in more danger. And what else? Let me see what I put in my notes so that I don't forget anything. Flexible. Yeah, I think. So yeah, sometimes you also choose a different entry. That's a good point that I did write down. So sometimes, especially up in Darwin, when we see that the current is going south, for example, we will jump in the north and then going along the wall and then finishing together in the south. When it's northerly current, which is more common and preferred, then we sometimes start in different places. We also, when we see that it's very, very strong in current, we will make our entry way more before to go together down. So often the dive guide also gives the tempo of going down, because what I was afraid when I came the first time to the Galapagos was I must be fast down. That's not a negative entry. It's just you roll in and you are going down immediately. You're not waiting on the surface, but it does not mean you have to race down. It means you go slowly down with the group. So you have not to, make a little marathon down. Very slowly descend, follow the guide. The guide will be very, very slow going down, and he will give you the tempo of how too fast you have to descend. So don't have to feel like I did the first time to Galapagos. You do not have to race down, because I also was afraid of my ears and all the horror stories I heard. Not at all. So it's a slow descent. It just means you're not meeting on the surface. That's all. What else? Let me see if I have dive requirements. Yeah, maybe have that topic. In order to have a dive liveaboard or join a dive liveaboard in the Galapagos Islands, you have to have an advanced open water, for the simple reason that we're diving below 18 meters. Which means obviously you have to have insurance-wise the advanced open water, otherwise you would not be insured. Or you can have open water with the deep diving certification of PADI, that usually works as well, but it's easier to have the advanced open water, and a minimum of 50 to sometimes 100 dives, which are required for some ships. But the minimum, I would say, is 50 dives. That being said, 50 dives in warm water Thailand, or very strong current, no visibility somewhere else, obviously it's very different. So 50 dives might not mean 50 dives. 40 dives or 30 dives in a really shitty condition, very strong current, whatever, might be more learning, a deeper learning curve, as 50 in a different area where it's warm and no problems whatsoever. However, 50 is kind of where we say most of the divers are not as focused on their equipment anymore and more comfortable. So now you might ask yourself, okay, what do I have to pay attention? So buoyancy control is a very, very big topic. Have your buoyancy under control, because that makes your dive much more enjoyable as well if you're not going up and down and up and down, because then you consume less air, you're very more relaxed, you actually see what you're doing and not like going in and back and forwards. Buoyancy control is number one that I would train. Be comfortable in open water, which means we do our safety stops in the open water. We're going away from the rocks. You should, again, have good buoyancy so that you can keep your 5 meters to do your safety stop, and do your safety stop by yourself. Do not need a guide that holds your hand to do so. So that should be comfortable in open water. Obviously, listening to briefings and follow the guide's instruction is a very, very big topic. It's not about aggressive diving against currents or any thing to prove, but I think that is the things that you could check and train. Often what I recommend is for the one day when we're going to the cold area, if you never have dived with a hood before, try it out, even if it's warm water, just to put it on to see how it feels, so it's not a surprise. And then, the back roll is sometimes something that divers are not as comfortable with it. So we are basically going from the big ship in a little Zodiac and then to the dive spot, and then we fall backwards in. So if you never have been on a liveaboard, you might have not done that. So that is something to train, to just try that and then go down, do a negative entry if you want to train something. But it will come naturally. We will have time to train that before we're going up to the north. So don't worry about that either. So question is always, is Galapagos something for me? Is it too hard for me or not? If you, as I said, comfortable in open water, if you are, a diver that can listen to instructions and can be flexible, have good buoyancy control, yes, I think Galapagos is something for you. You should be comfortable. You should not be, below 50 dives where you're still, unsure about your equipment. But it's about your enjoyment. So if you have not enough experience, then you wouldn't enjoy it. But the question is, if it's too hard, it's just about adjusting and being flexible underwater. Even if we have strong current, the dive can be spectacular, because the only thing we're doing is going down, holding onto the rock, and enjoying the cinema show, with sharks and sharks and sharks. And for photographers, when you have the big camera, I always recommend find yourself a rock where you can hold on to, make sure it's not corals, but find yourself a rock, make yourself comfortable, and then you can use up to 2 hands if you like to make photos. I think Galapagos is indeed for everyone. If you can listen to the instruction, if you're comfortable in open water, because currents will be there. It's the open ocean. It's how you deal with it. The more important thing is you should be calm. because that means you enjoy it. When you're then calm, even if you take a moment, when you found your rock and you need a moment to calm down, because it is exciting when you have strong current, calm down and enjoy it. Because it's just, honestly, if the ocean would look everywhere like in the Galapagos, we would have such a healthy ocean. It's just so many, many things to see that it's just, hard to decide where you want to look. It's just, yeah. I personally think it is for everyone if you are comfortable in open water, if you have good buoyancy control, and if you have not too much fear. And so don't have too much fear. Follow the instruction of your guides, and I think then you will be fine. So let me see if I have anything on my little list that I forgot. Talked about the Galapagos, flexibility, adapt, dive requirements. I hope I didn't forget anything that I wanted to talk about. So let's go into questions. I did see already a few. So let's start at the beginning. So that was, I will be in the Galapagos in a month's time. Is there a good chance to see molars and whale sharks? So Danielle, molars not, because we don't have molas. So we have Mola alexandrini, which is just a different subspecies. But yes, it is still a good time. However, they do prefer colder waters. So it will depend on how strong the upwelling of the crumble current is. So the molars are in Punta Vicente Roca. There are 2 cleaning stations inside and outside. And even in the hot season, which is right now, you do have chances to see them. Not as regular and as good chances as obviously in the nutrient in the cold season, but you still do have a chance. So look in your dive liveaboard if you do have Punta Vicente Roca in it, because a couple of ships do not go to the western side of Isabella. So there would be a good chance to see it. Whale sharks, yes and no. Theoretically, I would say no, because we have January, February. So we're going in February. The chances are very, very low because it's just not their season. So the whale sharks are there between June and October in the colder months. They don't seem to be feeding, so it seems not to be food related. However, they're usually more in those periods up in the north. However, we did have some reports now in January because we did have a lot of colder currents that were stronger than usual. So when you look at the sea surface temperature, beginning of this month, we still had a lot of cold currents, which mean that the equatorial front, which whale sharks again really like. So the front is basically where warm, cold waters kind of meet, I would say, in easy words. Basically, it's a boundary that is moving, and whale sharks tend to stick around those fronts. And we did have some reportings. So we did have whale sharks in January this year. So you never know. So there's always a chance. It's an open ocean. Whale sharks are around. And if the temperature in the front is shifting again, and you're very lucky, you might even see whale sharks in February. So usually not, but this year there might be a good chance. So what dive operations do you recommend for safe ocean diving and land excursions? Well, first of all, we obviously offer both. We offer citizen science expeditions where we do have a shark scientist on board, and we do offer normal dive liveaboards. So if you want to book a dive liveaboard trip, just contact me either on email or as a direct message. Michelle, I also can send you a message if you like and send you some more information. Also talk a little bit about the difference between citizen science trips as well as liveaboard diving. And also then can obviously help you in land excursion because there are different options. So in the Galapagos, you have either a dive liveaboard with just diving, or you have land-based ships. So you never really have it combined. But I can help you with that. Or if you're looking for, day trips, I also can give you good recommendations. So I will shoot you a message afterwards, Michelle, if that is what you want. And then I can give you, if you're looking into dive liveaboard operations, which are safe, I can give you good tips and also availability depending when you want to travel. So, really informative and helpful. Oh, thank you, Sam. Very nice. What is the deepest dive you do? So, when we're on our trips, the maximum depth is 30 meters. For the simple reason, most of us are on nitrox because it does give you a little bit extra bottom time. So, 30 meters is the maximum. And that's also a good reminder. Thank you, Sam. Is everyone is responsible for their own safety. So you are watching your depth. You are watching your deco time. So everyone has a computer. And it's not dive guide tipping on your shoulder and saying, well, you're a little bit too deep. It is your responsibility. It is also your responsibility to look on your deco time, because that is where accidents happen if we do not watch our own time. Because you might have been a bit below the dive guide instead of same level or above, which is the rule that you should follow, which is okay, but then watch your time and your deco time, because it might mean that you have to go up a little bit higher earlier than the group or the dive guide. So please make sure it is your responsibility, we are all adults, to always make sure that you are safe. But the deepest is 30 meters that we dive. Michelle, okay, we'll send you more information. Perfect. Then let's see on Instagram if you had any, where to fly to and how to get from the airport to the boat. So flying into most of the liveaboards. So if you're coming on a citizen science trip, it's Baltra. If we do have a different liveaboard, it might be San Cristobal. So there are 2 different airports in the Galapagos. Mainly it is Baltra. And there's also the pickup. So for many divers, they always ask me, can you not pick me up on the other port in town because I'm already there? It's like, no, we are in port in Baltra where the airport is. And that is also where the ship will wait for us. So we will pick you up on the airport, usually around 10:30, 11 o'clock on the day of the departure. And then we organize the transfer to the port of the vessel, which is Baltra port, where the vessel is waiting for us. And then most of the time, the 2 vessels that we're working, or the different vessels we're working with, you're coming on board, you're having lunch, and then we have all our safety briefings, different dive briefings, check dive. So it's a lot that happens the first day. So a lot of information. But yeah, Baltra, Seymour Airport, is it called? Depending on which vessel, however, you do have vessels that prefer to book the flights themselves. For the simple reason that it often happened that either the wrong airport was booked or the wrong date was booked or anything. So they basically prefer to book all the national flights. So from Ecuador mainland coming down. Ecuador mainland, I don't know if that might be one question as well. On the Ecuador mainland, where you're flying in with your international flights, it's either Quito or Guayaquil. Both of them are quite okay in terms of stopover. If you're staying a couple of days, if you're saying, you know what, it's international flights are always a little bit delayed, you don't know if the luggage comes, let's plan 1 or 2 nights just for puffer, then I would recommend Quito, because Quito has just so much more to do. So you can go to the Andes, you can go, to active volcanoes and so on. So I would then prefer flying via Quito, and then basically Quito to the Galapagos would be then Quito Airport to Baltra Seymour Airport. So let's see if we have any more questions. We are doing a liveaboard in the Galapagos and then thinking about staying a bit longer in the Galapagos. Could you please send us some infos where to stay to do some more diving? Love diving. Yeah, sure, can do. I will send you, hopefully I can, a message, because the comments I do not see from Instagram. So maybe Love Diving the World, if you could just send me a message, because on Instagram all the comments will disappear. Facebook will stay, but for Instagram I don't see the comments anymore. If you just shoot me a DM, a private message on Galapagos Shark Diving, and I will have a look, because obviously it would help me to have a quick chat, to look what you want to look for, what is the goal on land, as well as the time to see for availabilities. So what else do we have? What is the process to dive off a Zodiac? So Randy, so you go out with a Zodiac, so you're going with your tank, everything from the big ship down in the small ship, and there you're sitting down, and then we drive you to the dive spot, and then you roll backwards in. So the dive guide usually counts to 3, 1, 2, 3, everyone rolls back, and then slowly goes down together. Some places where we often don't have any currents, we actually meet on the surface. So the first 1, 2, days, we will often meet on the surface until everyone is comfortable, and then we descend together. And then up in the north, we usually roll in, and then we're doing a slow negative entry, which means we don't meet on the first surface. We're just going down and meet at around 10 meters. So that is the usual process of diving from Zodiac. Okay. That's perfect. We have it now 11:30 on the dot. I don't think I missed any questions. If you do have any questions, as you know, I will put the replay online, and then you just put your questions on it, and I will answer as fast as possible. As you know, I'm doing the social media right now alone, so it might take a couple of days to answer, but bear with me. For next Sunday, so I want to try to keep doing the lives. You also can write me questions that you would like to have discussed. So for next Sunday, I would like to talk a little bit more about the difference between the citizen science expeditions that we offer and the normal dive liveaboard, because we do offer both. And many people always say, well, it's the only difference to have a shark scientist on board, and it's not. So there are different reasons why the citizen science expedition is something completely different. Well, not completely different. It's the same ship often, it's the same itinerary, but it's just so much more meaningful. And I will talk a little bit about why that is. So yeah, hope that you join me for that next Sunday. Otherwise, please give me messages, give me ideas of which topic is burning under your nails. At least we say it in German. I'm not sure if you can say that in English like that. But yeah, let me know what is up in your head, questions that you would like to have answered. Very, very happy to do so. For now, I would say goodbye. Anyone that wants to join for Zoom, as you know, I will have a private Zoom session if you have some more questions that you would like to get answered in person. It's up in the bio. You can find a link to the Zoom. I will be online. I will be waiting and see if you have any more questions. Otherwise, this one will be going online, and I hope to see you all on next Sunday. Oh, wait, there was one more question. I will answer that away. Thank you. How do I get back in the Zodiac? Do they have ladders? Brandy, yes, they do. So you usually get your equipment unkitted. So you get your you're coming back, you're holding on to the rope that is on the Zodiac. Then you first give your weight belt so that you obviously don't go down when you giving your BCD up. So you're giving your weights down, or the pockets when you have. Then you're getting unclipped your BCD. So then the panga driver will take your tank, everything that has on your back up, and then the fins. And then you basically climb up the ladder. So it's quite comfortable. So yeah. Okay, perfect. I think that were everything. And you just let me know if you have more questions. I will answer it later. I wish you all a beautiful Sunday, and thank you for joining. Bye-bye.